And here. And then click on comment. All right, good afternoon, evening, everyone. We're gonna get started. If y'all haven't gotten food, there's plenty of food, so help yourself. My name is Lakeisha Hart. Thank you all for all right. I'm sorry. Forgive me in advance. I joke a lot. So where was I? We are here to talk about an opportunity that the state of Louisiana has to really capitalize on the work that we are doing at the state level, and a lot of folks are doing at the local level to reduce climate pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, co-pollutants. And so just as a matter of introduction, I'll go to the slide. All right, brief agenda. We will give you a little bit snippet of background into the Louisiana Climate Action Plan, and then we'll get into a little bit more information about the opportunity that is in front of us right now, which is two parts: a planning grant that the state has received for $3 million, and then an opportunity for state, local governments, and public entities to apply for awards for a nationwide competition that has $4.6 billion available. And so we really want to take this opportunity to give you all a background into the program, and then really just open up a conversation to get y'all's feedback about where y'all see priorities are in this space, also where y'all see near-term actions, and then just hear from you about concerns that are very relevant and specific to your community. So for those of you who love your cell phones, giving you an opportunity to get on your phones right now. So take your phones out. There's a QR code on the screen, but also at each table, there's a QR code if that's easier for you all to use. We have some survey questions. And once you open that link, if you keep that tab open the entire time, the questions will keep rolling, so you don't have to take the picture every time we pop up a new question. For those of you who do not like cell phones, we do have paper copies of the questions. So if you want a paper copy, raise your hand. We'll make sure we get one to you. So the first question is, have you or those close to you been impacted by climate change? And for those of you with paper copies, just hold on to them. We'll collect them at the end of the meeting, and we'll input that in with data that was presented online. So we have 100% yes for this question. I'm gonna move through these pretty quickly because we really want to get through the presentation and to have more time to have that dialogue that I talked about. Is anybody having trouble hearing me? Okay, thanks. All right, question number 2. And it should have automatically moved on your phone. Okay. You could just take a picture again if it did. Question is, how familiar are you with the Louisiana Climate Action Plan? Everybody got that one? All right. Half the folks are not familiar, some are somewhat familiar. Few folks are very familiar. Okay, I didn't do proper introductions. I apologize. Let me back up, rewind. My name is Lakeisha Hart. I am the state planning manager with the Division of Administration. And my role with twofold across the state government in general is to facilitate and help the state level long range planning, but also assist with planning at the regional and local level. And the primary reason that I'm here today is to get that feedback from you all. And this particular grant that we're talking about today is actually routed through my office, and I'm working very closely with the Governor's Office of Coastal Activity, who was responsible primarily for facilitating the current climate action plan that was finalized in 2022. And Isabel is from the Governor's Office, and so she'll be co-facilitating this with me. So at this point, I'll turn it over to her to go through a few slides. So we'll kind of go back and forth so you don't get tired of either one of us.
Very much. Thanks everyone for coming out. Like Lakeisha said, I am Isabel Engelhardt. I'm a policy advisor with the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities, which is the office that managed the Climate Initiatives Task Force, the governor created body that created the 2022 Louisiana Climate Action Plan. And I'm going to provide just the highest level, really brief overview of the Louisiana Climate Action Plan. I'm going to keep it pretty quick, even though most people said that they weren't familiar. There will be a link at the end of the presentation that is a resource you can go to learn more about it as well. And please feel free to ask questions throughout this meeting if you have them. But this is not really the climate plan we're here to talk about today, so I don't dwell on it too long. Instead, it is just really our foundation. It's a plan that we put together in 2022 to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions across the state. That is kind of, goal number one, but that is not the only thing that the plan is about. It also is about improving health and quality of life, strengthening the economy, adapting to climate change, and a lot of other things. And the plan really sets up a roadmap that allows us to take on our emissions, our very unique emissions, as you can see from this diagram, while also really doing it that incorporates all of those other objectives. I just want to point out on this chart right here, on the left is basically the national profile of greenhouse gas emissions, and you can see that the electric power sector and the transportation sector really make up the majority of national emissions. In Louisiana, we are very unique in that the industrial sector makes up at least 2/3 of our emissions, and that's a notoriously difficult sector to obtain emissions from. And so that means that the path that we take to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions is absolutely going to be unique from other states, and is going to, that's a big reason we want it to be also informed by the people that are experiencing these emissions and know this area the best. This is the pathway that the Climate Action Plan sets out to get us to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. You can see it models a handful of different policy changes that would get us there. And I do want to point out that it is sort of a suite of options that covers a lot of different sectors. And every little bit counts to get us there, because it's a long way to go. But really those three blue ones at the top make up a giant chunk of how we get there. And those three blue lines are represented in these three climate policy pillars that the Climate Action Plan sets out: renewable electricity generation, industrial electrification, and industrial fuels into low and no carbon hydrogen. So that was the super quick overview of the Climate Action Plan. Like I said, it's all available online on the governor's website, as well as more information about the Climate Initiatives Task Force, an annual report, and we can answer more questions. But I do want to ask this question: what sources of information do you trust on climate action? Where do you get your information about climate issues and opportunities and obstacles? This guy, should he come up and be giving the presentation? All right, so I see some local environmental groups. It looks like some national environmental groups, academia, news, some science-based groups. I'm going to move on. I do think it's a apt transition to the next question to point out that no one wrote Louisiana state government, and we would like to be a source of trusted climate information for all of you. So my next question for you is, how can the state improve its communication around climate? I'll also point out, you can see it here, these are all anonymous, as are obviously your paper worksheets, unless you don't want them to be. Patient specific and real-time data, more transparency, equity. Can everyone in the back see this? Okay. Yeah, do you want to also, we can pull it up on mine. Okay. Okay. You
The problem people have, nobody said they would state because there's apparent hypocrisy in what the state is doing. All of this hype about the governor's climate initiative plans, the 3 pillars, electrification, all of that is meaningless because the State Department of Environmental Quality keeps issuing permits for air pollution. Not one permit has any restriction on methane or carbon dioxide. If the state agency that's supposed to control the emissions that are causing global warming won't restrict them, it doesn't do any good for y'all to give a grant to community people or to a police jury. The big problem is not being faced, and EQ needs to establish permit limits and enforce them. Now they're claiming can't do that because EPA hasn't done it for the greenhouse gas. In 1979, I was on a committee that led to the State Hazardous Waste Management Plan. That was before the federal government got around to doing one. Same thing for the Louisiana emissions standards for hazardous air pollutants, NESHAP. We did that before the federal government did NESHAP. We do not have to wait for the federal government to do its job when we are on the front line. We need to do things here. And for the state to go around saying, well, we got this climate initiative plan, and yet the permits are just blow and go. No change. More greenhouse gases every week, a new permit. To me, the hypocrisy is why nobody asked you for information.
Yeah. Karen, you've really articulated a lot of points as well. I think you've probably heard him say it before. Right. I think I don't want to put words in your mouth here, so correct me if I mean, he's talking about the state being accountable for its actions, change, and the state really leading the way on putting our money where our mouth is and putting this plan into action. That I mean, you articulated it much better than I would, but
We need environmental limits for greenhouse gas. It's simple. No limits, plenty of greenhouse gases, and it doesn't make a difference how many grants you give to a community organization.
And 56% of them.
absolutely. Has to. Okay, we're gonna move on to like I said, this is kind of was laying the base for what our climate action planning, state climate planning foundation is, where we're starting from. But now I'm going to turn it back over to Lakeisha to talk about this specific EPA grant, which is an opportunity to build on our current plan and really move into the implementation stage, hopefully. Thank you.
Okay, so climate pollution reduction grant. So this is a $3 million planning grant. The EPA basically has allowed every state and tribe, some federally recognized tribes, to participate in planning activities around greenhouse gas reduction. In addition to state entities, some city MSA of a certain size in the state also got $1 million to do the same planning activities. So within Louisiana, the Baton Rouge and New Orleans area got $1 million planning grant. And so that's stage one of this activity. Like I said, that's the planning side of things. So the state is going through this planning effort to develop. Yes, ma'am. They took the largest MSAs with across the nation and kind of divided, and I think Lake Charles might have been third or fourth on the list within Louisiana. And so Baton Rouge and New Orleans were the only ones that qualified according to size. Yes. Yes. EPA just looked at the size of the MSA. They didn't look at necessarily the industry. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, the same concept with the fact that only EBR and the New Orleans area got the planning grants directly from EPA. We are coordinating across the state with tribes. And so if your tribe is interested, like we've been holding one-on-one meetings with tribes, definitely can get your contact information after this if you're interested in talking to us. But the goal of these meetings is to make sure that what we're planning at the state level allows room for y'all's benefits to be considered, and like the concerns that you have as far as greenhouse gas emissions are rolled up into the state plan, and that way are eligible, or y'all's entities are eligible for the implementation grants as well. Yes. I
don't know which time you talking to the state recognizes. You know, for sure that's 4 hours per week.
No, so we've been having the one-on-one, I'll stand up. We've been having the one-on-one conversations with the largest municipalities as well as the federally recognized tribes for the For the federally recognized tribes, the significance there is really that they are put in a separate bucket of funding, and so they're competitive against only other federally recognized tribes across the country, and so that makes them a little bit more competitive. And we really wanted to bring that to their attention and make sure that they knew that there was this opportunity for them. As far as every other municipality, every other community really outside of Baton Rouge and New Orleans in the state, that is why we are here. We are having talks with community members. Lakeisha will get in a second to why we kind of the specific areas of the state that we're going to for these in-person meetings. But our hope is that you are sharing this information after this meeting with your networks, and that you're getting in touch with us if there are opportunities that you think your parish, your municipality. We'd have to look into eligibility of state recognized tribes to actually apply for the grant. But even if you can't apply for the grant, your parish could, or your city could, HOMA could. So communicating with them too, and making sure that relationship is there.
HOMA, they did 7 different figures according to the old minutes. So it's not just HOMA in terms of their in that case, every area where our people are should be applying or seeking some of this money.
No, I think we need to check on the eligibility of the state tribes, but like I said, we are here to hear from you all and happy to have a follow-up conversation to hear from y'all specifically. You know, this is kind of hit the ground running, and we're still in the process of doing outreach. And so if we're happy to have a meeting with you all. Completely happy to do that.
Also, the eligible entities piece of this is really for stage 2, the competitive implementation grants. And this priority climate action plan that Lakeisha hasn't really touched on this yet, that's really the stage that we're in right now, and that prepares you for those grants. And so it is our focus, but this planning process is much broader than that. The $3 million covers also a comprehensive climate action plan, which will be us updating the climate foundation you just heard about. So even if not every community across the state is going to receive an implementation grant, but there's still room in our climate plan for the state to be considering what the communities need and where the most pressing priorities and concerns are. And so even if there is, a gap in this very specific EPA requirement, EPA program that doesn't allow for HOMA Nation to cover, the breadth of its members across municipalities and that kind of stuff, that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you and understand better where the concerns of HOMA Nation.
Any more questions about that? I will stay here as long as we need to make sure that. Sure.
This is how far and it has a breakdown. It's that a breakdown seem like a whole lot if you're dealing with climate change.
Yeah, so the $3 million is just for the planning effort. We started in July of this year. We'll go through 2027. So that's stage 1, the planning stage. The implementation stage, which is the $4.6 billion that's competitive nationwide, that is open to public entities, so states, parish, city. That will be awarded in 2 tranches. I think, like we were saying earlier, there's a general award where you can get between $2 million and $500 million, and there is a set aside for tribes where you can get awarded between $1 million and $25 million. And one more thing, and then I'll let you ask your question. The caveat to the implementation dollars, which is why we really are interested in hearing from you, is that if an entity wants to go after an implementation grant, the priorities they have to align with a priority that is in the priority climate action plan, which is what we're developing right now, and which is what we're getting feedback from right now. So this planning effort rolls up into a plan, then implementation funding follows, and the project has to align with the plan. Yes, ma'am.
You're dealing with
We are doing outreach. We have focus groups that include businesses, some nonprofits. And we're doing outreach to the communities, and I think in St. John, like we're partnering with the community organizations as we go to each city or each parish. So we went to River Parishes and we partnered with several of the nonprofits and environmental there. They came out to the meeting and we got their input. So we're not just, getting input from industry or getting input from the state. Like we are reaching out to community organizations and inviting them to these public meetings and getting input, and also honestly offering follow-up conversations if it's something that people want to continue to have those conversations.
And I'll add that the $3 million is to cover the full planning process, which is, multiple years. We are really in the very, very beginning of that. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And one of the things we're hoping to get out of these initial conversations are the community groups. It's why we ask, where do you get your trusted climate information from, to understand better who these groups are. When we're developing the comprehensive climate action plan and we come back for a community meeting, who do we need to be reaching out to so you can spread the news that we're coming throughout your networks? Who do we need to be talking to? And so that's part of it is understanding better who those groups are. So we have been using the networks that we have, but trying to build that out more.
Any other questions? Okay, so that's the two stages of the program, and the general goal of the grant program is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and co-pollutants that are harmful to our air. Program priorities, very generally, you can see them on the screen. To reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as I said, empower community-driven solutions in overburdened communities. There's also an economic development aspect. We want to be able to create mechanisms that create good jobs, address environmental injustice, and also lower energy costs. Okay, so I'll give these a little bit of another second for y'all to make sure y'all have them. And so the next slide is a question asking which of these priorities is most important to you. Yes, you can just take a picture again.
It should, yeah.
It should automatically refresh. If it doesn't, sorry, y'all. All right, we got about 50% coming in for reduced greenhouse gases and harmful air pollution. 53%. I give it about 10 more seconds. Okay. And this slide is just a picture of what I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with, setting the stage for the most impact that to our air quality as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions specifically. So each blue dot on the map is basically an emitter in the state. You can all see where the hot spots are, the river parishes that cover from the Baton Rouge down to New Orleans, but also in this area, for greenhouse gas emissions. The other thing I want to point out on this slide is one of the priorities for this program is benefit to low-income and disadvantaged communities, and those it's hard to see a little bit, but the hash lines outline the disadvantaged communities. And then also, it's not just greenhouse gas emissions that we're looking at, but we're looking at also other air pollutants. And so on this map, the different colors are the PM 2.5, and so we're kind of overlaying where do we have the hot spots for greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants, but then also where are our most vulnerable populations, and those will, from my perspective, be the priority areas for projects and initiatives in the state. So there's plenty of potential in this area for some good projects that really provide benefit to communities that really need it. And we just have a zoom in of the area. I'm sorry?
Those maps wrong. I just know it's about it.
2021. Yeah, 2021. So community benefits, that is the next thing we'll get into, and this will be pretty much the topic of conversation that we'll have at the individual tables, but I just wanted to highlight, based off of the EPA guidance and kind of where we tie in priorities from the climate action and you know, where the work can be done. These are just some high level community benefits that we see. So have a conversation around these, and then any others that you all consider as community benefits. And so for those of you in the back, if you can't see, we have improved access to services and amenities, air quality, public health improvements, energy saving costs, increased resilience in job and workforce development. And I think there also, is there a packet? Oh, the common table, yes. So the definitions of each of those, if y'all need it, is in a glossary, which everybody should have. There should be multiple copies on the table. And so the next question is really just asking you to rank these benefits according to the highest priority to you. Yes. That's it, right there. That's the number of people that's ranking. All right, air quality and public health improvements so far is the number one. I'll give it about another minute so we can go ahead and wrap this up. Not done? Yes. All right, air quality and public health improvements came in #1, followed by increased climate resilience, access to services and amenities, energy cost savings, and then job creation and workforce development. Then the last question, I think, is, are there community benefits from climate action that are not reflected on this list? So what are we missing? It's really what we want to get from you here. Housing and justice, protecting our children to be able to live in the state, reparations for the damage already done, one about insurance, loss of historical and cultural benefit, quality of life for underserved communities, methane reduction starting quickly, another one for housing, okay. Everybody, okay. Go ahead, ma'am.
And also, if you think of answers which you would have typed up here, even if you typed them up there, you can still add them to the hard copies that are at your table and leave those behind if there were things that come to you later. Absolutely.
Everybody good to come on? All right, thank you. Next, Isabel will come back and give you the kind of the plan that we've have started and where we're going. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just about done, and then we can have some more conversations, but also pause after this to answer more questions. Just want to talk really quickly about kind of step 1 of phase 1 of this longer process that we're talking about. And so that's developing a priority climate action plan. There's a lot of there's a big process that we're working through to get here, but really this is what we're trying to get out of this. This is what we're developing. Near-term, high priority implementation-ready measures that reduce greenhouse gases and harmful air pollution, and community-driven solutions that support the creation of good jobs and address environmental injustice in overburdened neighborhoods. These 2 things are the reason we're here to talk to all of you today. You know, EPA and our climate action plan sets out community benefits. It sets out some general ideas. We've been talking to subject matter experts and stakeholders about where are obstacles in the technology, where are opportunities. But what we really want to hear from is what does climate action look like in your community? Where are the highest concerns? How can we bring equity more to the fore in actually implementing these near-term opportunities? So as you can see here, I'm not going to stay on this too long because it's on your table and it'll be a lot easier to read. But in the middle there are those benefits that we just went over that you added a lot to. And so feel free to kind of elevate those benefits that you felt weren't represented and that you brought up in the conversations when we break out as well. But you know, this diagram represents those benefits are at the center of what we're doing right now. The outside circle are high-level priority focus areas that we took largely from the climate action plan, and that we feel there is opportunity for near-term action to really meet these goals. But there are a lot of pathways to get to those benefits through these and a lot of opportunities there. And so understanding better what these look like in your community. So we are going to break out at this point. I do want to stop right before we break out and just make sure there's not any more questions for the group, knowing you're coming to your tables, but just want to make sure we're all okay with everything we've seen. Okay, so we're going to split out into tables. Some of our team members from the Center for Planning Excellence are going to come and sit with you. And myself and Lakeisha and Louisiana Chief Resilience Officer Charles Sutcliffe in the back, we're going to be kind of moving around the tables. And we just want to hear from you. What are the greatest near-term challenges for you in the community? What are your greatest concerns related to climate change and clean energy? What types of climate-related activities would you like to see in your community in the next 5 to 10 years? And how can the state ensure the communities most burdened by pollution and economic inequality are prioritized for the benefits? I also think there's some food left, so feel free to get some seconds and then bring it back to your table. That's also an option.
All right.
It keeps going on.
So, you know what? Let's put that in afterwards. But I do put it yeah, I mean, I think you are. Yeah.
And I get back to respond. They say, it's so fundamental. As long as they do it.
I know that. Like I said, the one that's grant is not provide your own a bunch of money, and there are some here that you may expect them. Like policy, they don't require money. This is something that
We all.
Hey, can you- Whatever. I feel like last time, do you know, I feel like we're not muted. I think I want to mute us. Awesome. Okay. Oh, you're here.